This is a talk about our engineering department, lessons learned, where we started, and how we are hoping to end. So let's start at the beginning. About LeaseWeb. LeaseWeb was founded in 1997. Currently, we have about 350 people working at LeaseWeb. We have multiple locations, Germany. We have people in Asia, Pacific, and people in the US. But most of the people are working in Amsterdam in our headquarters. We have about 100 people working in our engineering department at the moment. We have in stock currently 65,000 servers on 7 locations, but we actually bought 7 new locations, so we now have 14 locations. So LeaseWeb before, we were doing development based on, I think, a pattern that you will recognize in a lot of different companies. We were doing development with constantly shifting priorities. We were getting told what to do. It was constantly changing all the time. We were not delivering what the business was asking for. We're doing development based on who was screaming the loudest. I don't know if everybody recognize any of these patterns, but it's not really helpful if you're constantly changing priorities. And we also had 2 different departments. One was operations, which was responsible for the production environment, and one was development, which is basically building the stuff. And this was causing a lot of friction. People in operations were not happy because they weren't getting what they wanted. People in development were not happy because their apps were not shipping fast enough, basically. And they didn't have enough control over their application. So, we were doing some things in Agile. Our development department was working with Agile, Scrum. Are you familiar with Scrum, the methodology? Can you give hand up? All right, good. Okay. So my talk is based on the assumption that you know a little bit about Scrum. So that's a good assumption. But it was all different levels of make your own Scrum. So some teams would take some elements that they would like and they would adjust it to however they would work. And there was no coherent, basically one Scrum in the company. Everybody started at different times with the Scrum, so there was one team which was in sprint 100 and another team in sprint 45 and another team in sprint 23. It was just confusing. So one team would say, oh, it's done in sprint 60, and then you would still have no clue when the feature would actually be done. So with this in mind, we wanted to change. We wanted to be more agile. We wanted to be more productive. So we set some goals. So our goals for our development department were these. We wanted a fully autonomously working team that can operate within the development department, talking to all the other parties, but they should be able to operate their own team. We want predictable development. So if we say a feature is going to be done then we want the feature to be done. And if it's not going to be done, then we want to be communicated early on so other teams know what the impact is going to be. We wanted to get priorities based on value for the company, so not who is screaming the loudest, but what will actually bring the most value to this company. We wanted to be transparent on our development and roadmap, so the way we used to work is in the beginning of the year we would make a roadmap and then we would publish that to the company. And then we put it on a file share, not look at it for the entire year. Everybody came in streaming, when is this feature happening? We bought this company, whatever, we need to do something. And then at the end of the year, we do an evaluation of our roadmap. And it turns out that we didn't actually accomplish anything. So we wanted to get that fixed. And we wanted to get a responsive organization. So if something in the market happens, we want to be able to respond to it. So, how did we do this? Well, first, we needed to convince our teams that this was actually a step forward. And it took some convincing. There were basically 2 sides in the building. You have the building that we want to prepare for everything before we start working in a new way. And you had the other group of people who said, well, let's just get started. We won't figure it out perfect way anyway. We will have to adjust along the way. That caused a lot of friction. It went on, we started preparations, and basically halfway through the preparations, we decided, okay, let's just start and we'll see where it works from there. And that was basically an executive decision. We're like, let's start. So we got started. So let's start with the first thing. We want empowered engineering teams. So how do you get that? Our first thing we did is a super simple thing. We want to get creative engineers. So we gave them 2 days every quarter to work on whatever they want. It could be a personal project, it could be work-related, it doesn't matter. You get 2 full days to work throughout the night and do fun stuff with your colleagues. So we have had amazing products coming out of these 2 hackathon days. It's really nice to see what people, if they get set free, can actually reach in 2 days. So what we do, basically we start, usually the hackathon is on a Thursday and a Friday. We start Thursday morning, we have a kickoff, everybody's invited, everybody gets a t-shirt so you can see who's actually participating in the hackathon. And then you do the entire Thursday building until a nightly event, and usually we do something fun, something to get your blood flowing. You're working for, I don't know, 10, 11 hours. We did laser gaming inside of the company. It was great. We have a really awesome building. Our second floor is not renovated, so it's in the original kind of messed up state. We would open it up, and it's a great place for laser gaming. We did trampoline dodgeball. I don't know if you ever heard of that. It's fantastic. You go to basically a warehouse like this, but it's filled with trampolines. They're interconnected, and you just play dodgeball while jumping on a trampoline. It's fantastic. So at the end of the 2 days, the engineers would show something they would be proud of. It would have to be demoable, otherwise you can't apply. And then there's a prize for the best developer. And what would happen is people would be convinced that they needed to work on something that the team was supposed to be working on, but they couldn't convince their manager this was a feature they needed to work on. So during the hackathon, we have seen people work on this exact feature, and afterwards at the demo, everybody was like, oh, that's what you mean. And usually afterwards, they got the time to actually finish the product. So first step, hackathon. It's great. Second step, make the team responsible for their own product. As soon as the entire team is responsible for their own product, they start caring for it. They start nurturing it. So all the way from development to in production, make them responsible. Make them responsible for if the shit breaks. They're the persons who get called out of bed. They're also the persons who want to fix it, because next night they won't want to be called out of the bed. And also, eat your own dog food. So we gave everybody at LeaseWeb a virtual server or a normal server or whatever product they wanted, so they can play with it and they can give feedback. They get intimate knowledge of our products. Okay. So, how do you measure where you are? So what we developed is a maturity model for a team. What is in the maturity model is our standards. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get to a standard level. Everybody gets to the same standard level. Everybody's working the same way. So what can be in the standard level is operational things you want. I want logging. I was monitoring. I want to get alerted if something weird is going on. I want graphing on how much usage there is on some things. Just things that make sense. But some teams were just lacking that. So we made a maturity model which easily show you how far along on the agile transformation you are. And it looks like this. This is in the office on a visible place in our third floor, which is the development floor. You can see we have 4 quadrants. The picture is a little fuzzy. But in the middle is the target where you want to end up. That's the sweet spot. All the buttons you see are the teams and the current state they're in. So currently, how many teams are in, and there's 3 levels: the target level, the intermediate level, the basic level, and the place we started from. So we have a set defined of rules that you need to oblige to as a team, and if you can prove that, you can move your button into the appropriate role. So if you prove that all your systems have central logging, have monitoring, have alerting, whatever, then you can go into the first column. But it also means culture and people. You're taking care of your team. You're doing retrospectives. You're having measurements on how happy your team is. You're doing things with your team to bond. Things like that are in the culture and people. Automation and tooling. Are you using continuous integration? Are you deploying your services with an automation tool like Chef, Ansible, Puppet, things like that? And then DevOps agility. Are you cross-training developer engineers and operations people so that you get to combine knowledge? That sort of things are in our standards. So by making the teams responsible for what they are responsible for, you have to have some set of definition of done. So I don't know, are you familiar with the definition of done? Okay. So definition of done is basically a document which, as a team, you create, and when you say, okay, it's not done until you've checked all these checkboxes. Super simple. At the end of each user story, is it in monitoring? Is it in logging? Do you have measurements of your product? Do you have a dashboard where you can display those measurements? Do you have documentation? Do you have a successful build? Do you have reviews from your team members? Is it deployed? Have you cross-trained? Have you talked to sales? Have you talked to marketing? Have you talked to support? Whatever you need to be doing, this is all in your checklist. Some things may not apply, but most things will apply every time you finish a user story. So this definition of done is different for every team, but the team defines their definition of done. And when they launch a new product and something goes wrong, they go back, update their definition of done, so it won't happen again. So the Scrum team. This is basically how our teams look at the moment. We have a product owner who is responsible for the product. So he is responsible for the order in which we're building features. You have the Scrum Master who's in charge of the Scrum process. So making sure the team does their retrospective, making sure that the sprint planning is done, making sure that the refinement is done, fetching all the people he needs for a meeting, inviting people to general meetings. But basically, the Scrum Master is a coach. Basically, the ideal Scrum Master is managing a team that is managing itself. So a Scrum Master trains somebody in, hey, we need to organize a refinement. You figure out who to invite for this. And then you have the development and operations people in one team. They're all participating. Our teams are roughly between 5 and 8 people. So, like I said, we were working agile, but we had different levels of agile. So what we first started doing was training. We first started training the Scrum Masters and the product owners. We got some amazing help from ProAwareness. They're a company based in Amsterdam. I can't thank them enough. They have actually really helped us in this transition. And after we had some solid agile principles within our engineering department, we went on to train the people outside of our engineering department. So we trained the owners of the company. What is Scrum? Why are we using it? What parts do you need to know to be able to participate in our process? We went on to train some key people in support, sales, marketing, the whole shebang. And after that, everybody was speaking the same language. Everybody was using the same processes, and we went into a same heartbeat. We reset our sprint counters. The sprint counters is now 2016. Sprint 01 is the first 2 weeks of the 2016. Sprint 02 is the second 2 weeks of the. So everybody in the company is now in the same rhythm, the same heartbeat. So that takes care of the fully autonomous teams that are empowered. They can now make changes. I'll come back. There's more to empowerment than just what I've told you, but this is at least a start to get them going. So let's tackle the big problem that is priorities based on the company's needs. To introduce, to solve this problem, we wanted to get away from just telling what the problems are to actually writing them down. Because if you write them down, they're on paper, you can compare them, we can actually calculate something. So we introduced business cases. And business cases is basically an idea that the business writes, so it's a marketing who says we need to have a cloud product, or it's networking who needs to say we need to have load balancers as a service, or something like that. And then the business supplies, if you make load balancers as a service, it will generate us X amount in revenue. But you don't know how much it will cost to build it. So the cost is actually evaluated and calculated by engineering through a process that I will explain now. So the first step is we get the business case. The second step is we go into a roadmap session. A roadmap session is a session where you invite the development team and the stakeholders, so the people who initiated the business case, or the people who will be touched by this business case. So think about support, think about marketing, think about sales, think about networking. Every part of the company that it touches, there's one person at least present at this roadmap session. It happens once every sprint. So with us, it's like a Thursday in the sprint. Basically, you discuss the business case. Okay, I want to have load balancers as a service. You say to the stakeholders, what does that service look like for you? How would you want it? And a salesperson will look at it from the sales perspective, and the engineer will look from the engineering perspective. You post everything on sticky notes, you put it on a wall, any ideas possible, no limitations, get everything on paper, and then evaluate when everybody's done brainstorming, evaluate, group the stickies, and then have the people at that meeting be responsible for defining a minimal viable product. So what do you what's the minimal thing you need to get this product off the ground? So if you teach them that their crazy ideas are all possible, they will also be realistic and say, hey, this sticky, I would love this sticky, but it's not realistic, we're not going to do it right now. So then the team is actually stripping away features, and you only get the core. So as soon as you have the minimal viable product defined, you want to find dependencies. This feature will require efforts from this team, this feature will require efforts from the other teams. Define those early and get the product owners of those teams involved so you can get resources from that team in the time frame that you want it. And also, after you calculated the cost of the engineering department, which the cost of this feature, you can define the priority of the refined business cases because it's obvious. You have the value of the product and you have the cost that the engineering department calculated, which I'll explain in a minute how you calculate it. And then it's obvious to everybody at the stakeholder session where in the ranking it should be. It should be the most value goes on top, the least valuable goes at the bottom. And the products that are non-valuable don't get developed. Okay, so that's that. Predictable development. So, like I said, we now have a minimal viable product. We want to turn that into something we can work with development. So we do a refinement. We do a refinement twice a week. Actually, I think I have a slide about that. So we do a refinement, which is figuring out going from the stickies on the user to actual user stories in Scrum. But we do this so our sprints are 2 weeks, and the whole company is in the same heartbeat. I actually said this. So we do a refinement. A refinement is just with the development team. So it's 2 times a week, 1 hour time box, but every team can make it different. But don't make it too long and make it time boxed. So if you don't get a meeting like for 2 hours going on the same subject because you will burn out. This is a very intensive session. You need to think about, hey, what does this story mean to me? How does that translate into an actual user story? What do I need to touch? What do I need to make? And this is where you go really into the technical details. So if during the roadmap session you have engineers present, you will see that they will say, but that's connected to this and blah, 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 and it can't do that. just knock it off, say, okay, however the technical limitations, that's whatever. We put the sticky here, this is what the company needs, and it's for engineering to figure out what that actually means in the refinement. So you now have the refinement, and that's where you basically convert the sticky note into a user story, and a user story will get story points. Are you familiar with story points? Okay. So story points don't explain time. They don't say how long it will take. They will say how complex an issue is. So an issue of uploading a web page is not complex, but deploying a web page on 40,000 servers is a different complexity. So keep in mind the complexity of the story, and once you start using, actually everybody in the team, you ask how complex is this, you give them cards, Scrum cards, and they will play a number, and based on the average number, you take the two outliers, like the highest and the lowest, and you mediate to some like level of user stories that you think that this story applies to. And keep in mind the definition of done. The story is not done until all the things in your definition of done are done. So that will have some influence on your story points. So now you know how complex a story is. You can go on to your definition of ready. When do you know that your user story is refined enough? Well, we have a small set of things that we define in our definition of ready. So have you informed the stakeholders? Have you talked to them? Did you get your opinion? Does a user story have a description that if somebody new joins the team, he understands what's going on? Does the story have story points, acceptance criteria, dependencies? Is it small enough to build? So there's a little trick, and it's called invest. Is the user story independent? Can you build it without any other dependencies? It should be a product, like a small product on its own that you could deliver. Is it negotiable? Can you still discuss with engineers what it should be and how it should look? Is it valuable? If it's not valuable, you should not build this. Is it estimatable? Can you estimate how long it will take to build this story? Is it small enough so you can actually fit it in one sprint? Don't work on a user story that's bigger than one sprint. It should be chopped up into small things. Is it testable? At the end of the user story, can you deliver something that you can test? It works, it's done. Okay, so now you know user stories. Now you have a refined user story that is done. You can figure out the team velocity. The team velocity is the amount of story points they can burn in a normal sprint. This is a value that you calculate over time. So a team member is added, your team velocity is going to change. But if you keep working in a couple sprints, you will find out, on average, we will burn about 30 story points or 40 story points. It doesn't matter. Keeping that in mind, if you know how many story points you're burning on average in each sprint, you can also calculate how long it will take you to do this business case, because you assigned story points to each business case. You know how many story points you can burn each sprint, so you can calculate the cost of the business case. The story points, basically of the business case divided by the team velocity, is basically the number of sprints. The cost of development is the number of sprints times the amount of engineers in there working on this user story, so you have the cost of development. And then the priority of this business case is the value which it will bring. So it will bring us 1 million in sales, yay! Minus 40,000 euros in development, boo! And then a priority of plus, well, what did I say? Like 900,000, yay! So this is probably a business case that will win because, hey, it's almost $1 million in revenue you're going to win. Great. So now you have priorities based on value for the company. The next thing is a responsive organization based on market needs. To get this, we have product managers. And a product manager is basically responsible for all the things not development. So it's finding out trends in the market. It's talking to other companies, talking to customers. It's procurement of new hardware. It's a strategy, and it's profit and loss. So it's the business side of the product engineering. Okay. So we also introduced something in that you won't see in your average Scrum methodology. Because we had this battle of how should we work, we had to compromise a little bit. What you're seeing is compromised. So our founder said, hey, it's great that you want to work at whatever way, but we want to have some checks and balances. The product steering committee is the checks and balances. So all the teams have developed their priorities. They know what they're going to be working on. They present this to the project steering committee. The project steering committee is the board and some other important people in the company. And they say, well, based on the business cases, we calculated that we should be working on this and this in this order. And this is our roadmap that we're going to work on for at least the next 4 sprints. The owners could say, no, I disagree with you, but they would have to have really good opportunities, or they would have to have really good arguments to say, no, it's not going to be like that, because you have a business case, you have value, you have cost. So it rarely happens. But this roadmap session is purely here to create trust between the board and the engineering department. They can see what is going on. They can step in if they need to, if they really need to. But usually it's just information, hey, we're going to do this. And then it's at the end, we have accomplished this, presenting what you have accomplished. So this is our compromise for now. I think it will go away eventually as we mature as an organization. But like I said, we present what we're going to do the next 4 sprints. And we don't only present what we're going to do for the next 4 sprints, we also commit to it. So we say we're going to deliver what we say we're going to deliver in the next 4 sprints. And that is different, because Agile is all about you try to make whatever you can make in a sprint. But we've gotten so good at Agile that we know the amount of story points. We leave some slack. We have 70% of our time dedicated to product engineering and 30% fixing incidents, that we can just say, okay, based on past results, we can commit easily to 4 sprints in the head, so the teams know what we will be working on in the next 4 sprint. So this is the point where all the planning, evaluation, and work to get the business case done is done, and the team actually starts development. And we also I'll check off the predictable development. So the only thing left is transparency on the development and the roadmap. So business cases per team. What is great about the business cases is you can see what teams deliver the most value. Is it a product? Is it a feature? It doesn't matter. If there's a team, they get submitted business cases, and based on the pipeline, you see how you need to scale your engineering team. If there's no business cases for this team to work on, maybe you should deploy your resources differently. If there's a lot of resources, maybe you should scale up your team. So showcases. At the end of each sprint, we basically do a demo of the products. Like I said, a story needs to be presentable. We don't present all the things, we present the important things. We celebrate the things we did well, because normally we would deliver a product and it would be like, whatever, and we would move on to the next thing. We don't do that anymore. We go demo to the company. The company actually joins this event. We try to make it nice. We try to make it fun. And we demo a working feature. So this is basically us from development telling to the company, look, we committed to the product, we delivered the product. Now here is your responsibility now. Go sell it, go engage with our customers. So this is the handover point at some point. As a team, we also do a retrospective at the end of each sprint. We ask ourselves the question: what went well, what didn't went well, what would you like to change, what do you not want to do the next sprint? How would you plan differently? Did you overcommit? Did you undercommit? Things like that. Was there friction in the team? Why are the people not working well together? Things like this. This is the event where you can speak up. We also do an anonymous happiness measurement thing, which is just a Google form we send out to each team member before the retrospective. Just fill out how you're feeling and which team you are, and would you recommend working for this team? This is a super easy way. It takes you 5 minutes to show how well you're going on with this team. And you can compare it to different teams. So we have one team which is really happy. We have one team which is not. You can compare, see what's going on, read their retrospectives, see that they have an internal struggle or two team members that can't get along. It's a great way to actually help teams evolve. So once you release your product, it's also important to validate your business case. So sales has said, we're going to get €1 million from this feature. Validate that it's actually true. And it's really easy. During development, you just add counters or logging or whatever you want to do to your feature. So how often was there clicked on the button? How often was a server installed with this feature? How much of time of money was saved? Because they were doing it by hand, it would cost an hour and a half, and now they can do it in an automated fashion, and it takes only 10 minutes. Based on these results, you define if this user story should actually be developed more. So you have your MVP. Should you invest more? Well, only if people are actually engaging with the product, if it brings value. So this is a nice check and balance on what should I be working on afterwards, and are your business cases that you're getting actually valid? Okay, I'm running out of time. So I already said this, business case per team, how understaffed or overstaffed important is your team, scale your team accordingly. And then now we actually have all the goals for the company reached. We're actually still in the process. We're maturing as we go. Like I said, this is the actual picture of how mature our teams currently are. So we have a lot of work to do, but we're getting there. And this model is actually make it really fun to actually achieve a new level, because it's like an upgrade. You can be proud, like, hey, put sticker up, and everybody in the new company, if you're hitting like a spot that nobody has hit before, it's like, oh, how did you do that? But everybody's actually helping each other along, because one of the requirements will be met by one team, and all the other teams can benefit from their work. So with that, I would like to say, this is basically the end of my talk. It's a lot of information to take in. I'd be happy to explain any questions you have. And we're hiring, so if you want to come join LeaseWeb, we have spots available.
Thank you, Arnoud. Maybe we have time for one question.
Yep, almost there.
Thank you. I find the 4 weeks commitment quite intriguing. Could you take us through the process? Do you have separate refinement and sprint planning, and how long would the sprint planning take for a full commitment?
So we have 2 refinements per week, so 4 refinements per sprint, time boxed in 1 hour, and that will just crunch away at our roadmap for the next coming 4 weeks. Then we have a story mapping session once every sprint, which is for the more future than that. So we're currently, you're building up a buffer of user stories that you already have refined and a project that you're going to be working on. And then basically if you have enough user stories in your buffer, it's really easy to commit to 4 sprints. It's just what you already planned, spread it out by your team velocity. That's where you're going to do the next 4 sprints.
Well, thank you, Arnoud. I see there are more hands, but we're basically running out of some time.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation. If you have questions, don't hesitate to just walk to Arnoud. He will be around for the rest of the day. And another warm applause for Arnoud.